Before I say anything else, pause the video for a second and tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from and what time it is there right now. Trust me, it matters. Because the night this happened, it was 2:17 a.m. in Michigan. And the grocery store felt wrong in a way I still can't fully explain. The fluorescent lights were humming like they always do. But one near aisle 7 kept flickering, slow and uneven, like a bad pulse. I was alone at the register, half awake, counting down the minutes until my break, when the automatic doors made a sound they'd never made before. They didn't slide open cleanly. They hesitated, just a fraction of a second, like they were deciding whether to let something in. Then the sensor chimed. Someone walked through the doors. At least, I thought it was someone. They didn't grab a cart, didn't look around, didn't even shake the snow, except there was no snow on them at all. Outside, it was dumping. Michigan winter doesn't miss. But their shoes were spotless. They stood under the lights for a moment, completely still, like they were adjusting, or like the store was adjusting to them. When they started walking, I noticed there was no sound, no footstep echo, no fabric rustle, and when they passed the freezer doors, their reflection didn't quite match their movement. I told myself I was tired. Graveyard shifts mess with your head. That's what you say when you need the job. They stopped at my register and looked at me. And instead of fear, what hit me was something worse. The feeling that I'd been seen. Standing there, heart racing, I started wondering how I'd ended up working nights at this place at all. I didn't plan on working nights. Nobody does. You don't grow up thinking, yeah, one day I want spend my life under buzzing fluorescent lights while the rest of the world sleeps. But life doesn't really ask what you want. It just kind of backs you into corners and waits to see what you'll accept. For me, that corner was this grocery store off a half-lit highway in rural Michigan. The kind of place that looks normal during the day and feels completely abandoned after midnight. I'm not some drifter or thrill seeker. I was just trying to stay afloat. Rent kept climbing, hours kept getting cut, and the night shift paid a couple bucks more an hour. That was enough to sell it to me. Fewer customers, less noise, no managers breathing down your neck. Just stock shelves, run a register, and keep your head down until sunrise. At least, that's how it was sold to me. At first, it really did feel easy. Nights have their own rhythm. The town goes quiet, the parking lot empties out, and the store turns into this weird little bubble outside of time. You start recognizing the regulars, the insomniacs, the truckers passing through. The same two guys who smell like cigarettes and buy scratch-offs at exactly 1:40 a.m. every night. You learn their habits, their faces, their small talk. It makes things feel predictable, safe, even. And that's the thing about predictability. You don't notice it until it breaks. I'd clock in around 10, grab a stale coffee from the break room, and settle into the night. The store always looked different once the doors locked at midnight. The aisles felt longer, the shadows deeper, sounds carried farther. Every cough, every cartwheel squeak echoed like the place was way bigger than it really was. You start hearing things you didn't notice during the day: refrigerators clicking, pipes knocking, the low hum of electricity running through the building. After a while, your brain starts filling in the gaps. People warned me about nights, but they never said why. They'd just smirk and say stuff like, "You'll get used to it," or "Don't take things personal after midnight." I figured they meant drunks or weirdos. Every grocery store has those. I wasn't scared of weird. I'd worked retail long enough to know that strange comes with the job. What I didn't realize back then was that the night shift wasn't about avoiding people. It was about limiting how many people were around when certain customers showed up. Looking back, there were signs right away. Little things that didn't sit right but were easy to brush off when you were tired and broke. A customer who didn't blink. Someone who stood too close. Someone who knew your name without you telling them. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that Michigan nights just mess with your head, especially when winter stretches the dark out longer than it should. That's the lie I lived in. The idea that this was just another job, another weird phase, something I'd laugh about later. But the longer I worked there, the more the store itself started to feel like it was hiding something. And once midnight hit, once the doors locked and the real night began, the grocery store didn't feel like a place people came to shop anymore. It felt like a place they came to be seen. And that's when I started noticing how the store changed after midnight. After midnight, the store stopped feeling like a store. That's the only way I can explain it. The front doors would lock with this heavy metallic thunk that echoed way longer than it should be. And once that sound faded, it felt like we'd been sealed in. Like whatever was outside didn't matter anymore. The lights stayed on, sure, but they felt harsher somehow, colder. The kind of light that makes shadows look too sharp and faces look a little off, like you're seeing people through bad glass. The air changed too. During the day, the place smelled like produce and bakery bread and cheap cleaner. After midnight, there was this stale, electric smell, like warm dust and metal. You don't notice it all at once. It just creeps up on you until you realize you've been breathing shallow without knowing why. Even the temperature felt wrong. Some aisles were freezing, like the cold spilled out of the freezers and never left. Others felt weirdly warm, almost stuffy, like the air wasn't moving. Sound worked different after midnight. The refrigerators hummed louder. The freezers clicked and popped like they were talking to each other. Every footstep echoed, even when no one was walking. Sometimes you'd hear a cartwheel squeak from the back of the store and assume it was your coworker, only to remember you were the only one scheduled that night. I'd call out anyway, just to break the silence. The sound of my own voice always felt wrong in there, like it didn't belong. Time didn't behave either. Minutes stretched. Hours elapsed. I'd swear it was close to 2, check the clock, and it'd be 12:41. Other nights, I'd blink, look up, and suddenly it was almost 4. No memory of the time in between. You start losing track of yourself a little when nothing around you feels anchored. The cameras didn't help. There were monitors behind the counter showing every aisle, every angle. I hated looking at them after midnight, not because I saw things, but because sometimes I didn't. An aisle would look empty on the screen, but when I glanced up, I could have sworn there was someone standing at the far end, or the other way around. A figure on the monitor, gone when I checked in person. I told myself it was bad angles, old equipment, anything but what my gut was whispering. That's when I started realizing the store wasn't empty at night. It was waiting. There was this feeling, like being watched without seeing eyes, like the aisles were paying attention, like the building itself knew who belonged there and who didn't. I'd catch myself walking faster for no reason, shoulders tense, keys clenched in my pocket even though I was still hours from clocking out. The place made you paranoid, and then made you feel stupid for being paranoid. And the worst part, after a while, that feeling started to feel normal. That's how the night shift gets you. It eases you into the weird until you stop questioning it. until you stop noticing what doesn't make sense, until something finally happens that you can't explain away, no matter how hard you try. For me, that moment came in the form of one customer, the first one who didn't just feel strange, but felt wrong. It was just past 1 a.m. when I saw them walk in for the first time. The kind of moment that sticks with you, even when you tell yourself it shouldn't. The automatic doors slid open like normal, but something about the way this customer moved didn't feel normal at all. They didn't push a cart or grab a basket. Hell, they didn't even glance around like most people do when they come in. They just stood there, stiff, like a mannequin left out in the cold, except way too tall and too quiet. At first, I thought maybe they were one of those late-night folks just passing through, trying to kill time or maybe looking for a snack to keep them awake. But there was no warmth behind their eyes, no blink, no subtle movements you expect from a person. Their gaze locked on me, but it wasn't like they were curious or friendly. It felt cold, like they were studying me, sizing me up, or maybe something worse. I remember catching a glimpse of their shoes spotless, even though Michigan had been dumping snow all night, and there was no sound when they walked. No scuffing, no shuffling, just this eerie silence that made my skin crawl. You ever notice how your own heartbeat starts to sound deafening when something feels off? That's exactly how it was. When they got close, I tried to make small talk, asking if they needed help finding anything. Nothing, no response. Just a slow, deliberate stare that felt like it could freeze you in place. I blinked, cleared my throat, and they finally moved slowly, like they were gliding, not walking. Their reflection in the freezer doors didn't match their movements exactly. It was like a bad video glitch, but right there, in front of me. I wanted to chalk it up to exhaustion, maybe some weird optical illusion caused by the flickering fluorescent lights. You start convincing yourself of things when you work the graveyard shift long enough. Things like it's just your brain playing tricks because you, retired and isolated. But this wasn't one of those tricks. That night, something inside me flipped. The normal boundaries of the world cracked just a little, and I caught a glimpse of something darker lurking beneath. I realized I wasn't just dealing with a strange customer. I was staring at something that wasn't supposed to be there. When I started noticing the other oddities, the way certain aisles seemed to hold shadows that stretched too long, the whispers you swear you hear but can't pinpoint, and the unspoken rules the night shift kept. Things I'll tell you about next. Because after that first encounter, nothing was the same. The store stopped feeling like a place to buy groceries and started feeling like a trap. And trust me, the patterns I couldn't ignore came fast after. After that first weird night, I kept telling myself it was just a fluke. Maybe I'd been too tired, or the fluorescent lights were messing with my eyes. But then the strange stuff started piling up, and it was impossible to ignore. Like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, except the picture they showed wasn't something you'd want to see. The patterns showed up in the customers themselves. Not all of them, but enough to make me stop noticing normal people. Some of these folks came in at the exact same times, down to the minute. They didn't shop the way anyone else did either. No grabbing snacks or filling baskets. They'd just stand, watching, sometimes staring at things that weren't there. Sometimes just standing in the middle of an aisle, frozen, like they were waiting for something or someone. There was this one aisle near the back where we kept the frozen veggies that would always get cold, like colder than the freezers themselves. No matter how often we checked, the temperature never dropped. I swear I heard whispers coming from there once or twice, but when I'd look, there was nobody around. Just empty shelves, and the hum of the machines. I started noticing the same customers showing up over and over again. They moved in the same weird way, no sound from their footsteps. Their eyes would lock onto me, but not like they were curious, more like they were calculating, waiting. Like they knew something I didn't. One of them even appeared in the security footage at times when I was positive the aisle was empty. I checked and rechecked the cameras, but there was no explanation. The footage was too grainy to be tampered with, yet the images didn't line up with what I saw in person. Then there were the sounds. Late at night, the store felt alive in ways I hadn't noticed before. The refrigerators clicking and popping felt like a language, like they were communicating some secret code. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps or a cart rolling down an empty aisle. When I called out, nobody answered. When I checked, no one was there. It was like the store had a pulse of its own, and it wasn't beating in time with mine. The night crew had their own set of unspoken rules too, things we weren't supposed to do or say, like never talking about the customers after dark, never calling out their names, never making eye contact if you could help it. I found out that the other guys before me had quit without explanation, or just stopped showing up. Management never mentioned it. Everyone acted like nothing was wrong, but I knew better. The patterns were there, and they kept getting worse. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a figure standing in the shadows, just watching. Sometimes I'd find stuff moved around that I hadn't touched. Or doors that were locked wide open when they should have been shut tight. Every night, it was like the store was shifting, breathing, waiting for something. And once you start noticing those patterns, it's impossible to go back to ignoring them. Because deep down, you realize this place isn't just a grocery store after hours. It's something else entirely. And that's when the real rules come in, the ones nobody talks about. But before I get into that, let me tell you about those rules, and how every night they made me feel like I was part of something darker than I ever expected. Working the night shift comes with its own set of unspoken rule stuff nobody ever wrote down, but everyone who's spent enough hours in that store just knows. At first, I thought they were just little habits or superstitions, the kind of things people say to mess with the new guy. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized those rules were actually survival tactics. Like some weird code the night crew lived by to keep whatever was lurking at bay. For starters, there was the rule about never making direct eye contact with certain customers after midnight. You'd think that sounds simple enough, but the way I understood it, looking someone or something straight in the eye when the store's empty wasn't just rude, it was dangerous. I saw what happened to a guy who ignored that one. He ended up quitting without warning. One day he showed up for his shift, and the next, he was gone. Never heard from him again. Management acted like it was normal turnover, but the night crew whispered different stories. Another thing was about never calling out names, not even casually. If someone didn't answer when you said, "Hey," you didn't try again. Not because they were ignoring you, but because some voices were better left unheard. The store had this way of twisting sounds late at night, making you think you heard your name in the silence, but that wasn't the kind of attention you wanted. The layout of the store mattered too. Certain aisles were off limits after hours, like the freezer section near the back, or the produce aisle on the far left. I asked why once. The answer was always some vague shrug or a "you don't want to know." Sometimes those areas would get colder than the rest of the store, and no amount of thermostat fiddling would fix it. If you accidentally wandered in, you'd feel eyes on you. Like the shadows themselves were watching. Best to keep moving. There was a silent understanding not to linger or make noise near the loading docks either. Late at night, you'd hear thuds or scraping sounds back there, but whenever you peeked out, there was nothing but empty darkness and piles of cardboard boxes. No trucks, no workers, just silence. Even the break room had its own weird vibe. People rarely hung out there after midnight. It was small, cramped, and felt like the walls were closing in. You'd catch glimpses of shadows in the corner of your eyes, or hear noises that vanished the moment you turned your head. The weirdest part was that none of these rules came from any official training. Nobody handed me a manual or a checklist. It was just stuff you picked up from the other night, stabbed through sideways glances, half-joking warnings, or stories told in whispers. It was like we were all in on some secret no one wanted to admit out loud. And the truth. Breaking these rules wasn't just frowned upon, it brought consequences. Weird things would start happening, things you couldn't explain. Lights flickering when you weren't near the switch, doors opening on their own. The feeling that you were never truly alone, even if the store was empty. I wasn't sure who made the rules or why, but the longer I worked those nights, the more I felt like the rules were less about the customers, and more about protecting us like a fragile barrier between our world and something else lurking just beyond the shelves. That barrier started cracking the night everything went wrong. That night started like any other quiet, slow, with the usual hum of refrigerators and the distant buzz of flickering lights. But somewhere deep into the shift, things started slipping out of place. It was subtle at first, like the store was holding its breath, waiting to exhale a secret it had been keeping for too long. It began with the freezers. One of them started clicking and popping louder than usual, but it wasn't the normal mechanical noise. It was sharp and erratic, almost like it was trying to communicate. I remember glancing over, half expecting to see a technician fixing a problem, but there was no one there. The freezer doors rattled like something was pounding from the inside. Then the lights. The flickering near aisle 7 that had been bugging me for weeks suddenly got worse. They didn't just blink. They dimmed and brightened in a rhythm that felt too deliberate to be a malfunction. The shadows they cast grew long and twisted, stretching out in unnatural shapes that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I wasn't alone that night, at least not in the way I thought. The store, usually empty except for a handful of weird customers, felt crowded. Not with people, but with something else. The air thickened, and I swear I could hear whispers, soft, urgent, just beyond comprehension. I called out a few times, but only silence answered back. Then came the footsteps. Not the ones I made walking the aisles, but light, almost gliding steps echoing from the far end of the store. I grabbed my flashlight and started toward the noise, heart pounding. Every step I took, the sound got closer, then faded. It played with me like some twisted game of cat and mouse. When I got to aisle 10, the freezer door was cracked open. I could see frost inside. But something else was there. Tour, shadow, or maybe a figure too dark to make out clearly. I reached out, and the temperature dropped so fast I thought I might freeze solid. Then, just as suddenly, the door slammed shut, trapping me in the eerie silence that followed. I was shaken, but what really broke me was what happened at the register. The same figure I'd seen earlier appeared, standing just beyond the checkout lane. No sound, no movement, just this presence that sucked the warmth from the room. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. It looked right at me, well, if you could call those eyes looking. They were hollow, endless pits that seemed to pull everything in. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the register. That's when the alarms went off. Not the emergency kind, but the quiet, insistent beep that means someone's at the door. The automatic doors slid open, but no one came in. Just an empty, cold wind rushing through the store like a warning. That night, everything I'd learnt, every warning, every rule, slammed into me all at once. The store wasn't just a building. It was a place alive with something ancient and hungry, and it had been waiting for me to notice. After that, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Whatever was in the store wasn't just a story, a hallucination, or a ghost tale. It was real, and it wasn't done. I never wanted to get that close, never wanted to see what was really behind those empty, soulless eyes. But one night, the line between just a customer and something else completely shattered right in front of me. It started with that figure I'd been avoiding, the one that stood too still, moved too silently, and watched me like I was prey. I was stocking shelves near the back of the store when I noticed it again. At first, it was just a shadow slipping between aisles, too quick to catch clearly. But when I turned the corner, it was standing right there, inches from me. I froze. There was no blinking, no breathing sound. The skin looked wrong to pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over something not quite human. The face was too smooth, like a mannequin, but the eyes were the worst part. They were dark voids, like black holes, pulling in every bit of light and hope. I tried to back away slowly, heart hammering, but it tilted its head not like a person curious, but like a predator deciding if I was worth the trouble. Then it smiled. Only it wasn't a smile anyone could feel safe around. It was slow, unnatural, stretching far too wide, revealing too many teeth that looked sharper than they should. A grin that didn't reach those hollow eyes. My throat went dry. I wanted to run, but my legs felt stuck in place, like they were glued to the floor. That's when the real nightmare started. The figure moved closer, not walking, gliding again. Suddenly, the store around me felt alive with cold. The air thickened so much I could see my breath. The lights flickered violently, throwing twisted shadows everywhere. I caught glimpses of other figures materializing in the darkness. More like it, silent watchers with that same impossible gaze. I finally broke free and sprinted toward the register, not daring to look back. Behind me, the store's normal sounds, the hum of freezers, the beep of registers, were drowned out by this low, whispering hiss that felt like a warning. Like the store was trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. When I got behind the counter, I grabbed the emergency phone to call for help. But the line was dead. No dial tone, no crackle, just silence. The figures gathered outside the aisles now, watching, waiting. I was trapped. That's when I realized something worse. These weren't customers who had lost their way. They weren't people. They were something else, something ancient and hungry, using the store as a hunting ground or a trap. And me, I was the bait. That night, the store showed me the truth no one else would admit. The night shift wasn't about keeping the place open, it was about keeping the darkness contained. About keeping whatever these things were from slipping into the world outside. I don't know what they are exactly, and maybe I don't want to. But I know now that some of the customers aren't human. They never were. And once you see that there's no going back to pretending it's all just a strange job. But the worst part? The management already knew. After everything I saw that night, I thought I was the only one who knew what was going on, that I was losing it or caught in some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But the truth hit me like a freight train when I stumbled onto a conversation between two managers in the back office. I wasn't snooping. I swear I was just grabbing some extra keys, or maybe looking for the bathroom, but I heard them clear as day. They weren't talking about the store's hours, or the usual inventory stuff. No, they were talking about the others, the ones who came after midnight, the ones that didn't belong, and the weird part. They sounded like it was old news, like this had been going on for years. One of them said something like, "We've been keeping this under wraps for decades. No way this place stays open if word got out." The other nodded, mentioning how they'd lost people before. Workers who didn't last through the night, or who just disappeared with no explanation. But instead of shutting down, they just rotated crews, told everyone to keep their mouths shut, and moved on. I couldn't believe it. Management wasn't just aware they were complicit. They'd been letting this go on, putting profits and keeping the store open above everything else, even if it meant risking the lives of the night crew. And the weirdest part, they acted like it was just part of the job, some unavoidable risk you took when you signed up for the night shift. I thought about the strange, quiet warnings from the staff, the rules, the whispers, the disappearances. It all made sense now. The managers weren't protecting us from the darkness. They were protecting the store's secret. The real reason this grocery store stayed open wasn't just for the customers who shopped after hours. It was because it served as some kind of barrier, a containment zone. I tried to confront them once, ask point blank what they expected from us, what the hell was really going on. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. One of them said, "You keep your head down and your eyes open. That's all you can do." Like it was the worst advice ever given, but the only advice that mattered. From then on, I understood why no one talked about those nights. Why people quit without explanation. Why the staff was so tight-lipped. The truth was heavier than anyone could handle, and the store's management had made sure it stayed buried deep. That night, I realized I was stuck in the middle of something way bigger than a late-night grocery gig. Something older, something hungry. And whatever it wasn't done. The store wasn't just a place to clock in and out anymore. It was a front line, and I was on the edge. But that still didn't explain why the store was open at night in the first place. And that's exactly what I'm going to tell you next. You ever wonder why some places stay open at night, even when there's barely anyone around? I mean, yeah, late-night snacks and emergency trips happen, but this store, it felt different. After everything I found out, it hit me the night shift wasn't just about keeping shelves stocked or ringing up a few stragglers. It was way more than that. The store was open at night because it had to be. I started digging quietly, of course asking questions I wasn't supposed to. And what I uncovered was a whole other world beneath the fluorescent lights. The store wasn't just a place for groceries. It was a kind of anchor, a barrier holding something back. See, this place sits on a kind of thin spot where reality feels weaker, like a crack between worlds. The weird customers. They weren't shoppers. They were visitors from somewhere else. Something else. The store's late-night hours weren't about serving people. They were about keeping those visitors contained. The night crew wasn't just working a job. We were guarding the line. It explained the rules, the whispers, the shadows moving just out of sight. The store's layout, the aisles that got colder than the freezers. The place's management told us to avoid. They were all part of this strange, silent battleground. Every beep, every flicker, every shadow was the building itself pushing back against the darkness, trying to creep in. And the more I learned, the heavier it got. I wasn't just ringing up gresserizers, I was part of a nightly ritual, whether I wanted to be or not. The night shift existed to keep the store open. Yes, but more importantly, to keep whatever was out there from slipping through those doors and into the world outside. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of those customers in the aisles, their hollow eyes watching me like they were testing the barrier, looking for weaknesses. It wasn't paranoia, it was real. The store was a line drawn in the dark, and I was standing guard. The thought that this place, this normal-looking grocery store, was a front for something so old and sinister blew my mind. It made every late-night shift feel like a battle I didn't sign up for, but couldn't escape. I tried to tell myself I could quit, that I could just walk away and leave this all behind. But once you read part of it, once you see what's really there, you realize quitting isn't that simple. The store needs you. The darkness won't wait. That's when I knew my last shift was coming, whether I wanted it or not. And that's what I'll tell you about next, the moment I faced the choice to stay or get the hell out, and why walking away wasn't so easy. I knew it was coming, that last shift. You can feel it in the pit of your stomach when something's about to snap, and that night I was bracing for it. I kept telling myself I'd walk away after this one. No more late nights, no more weird shadows, no more pretending this grocery store was just a job. But walking away, man, that turned out to be way harder than I thought. From the moment I clocked in, the air was thick with tension. The usual hum of the store felt like a low growl, like the place knew this was the end of the line for me. The lights flickered like they were struggling to stay alive, and every aisle seemed darker than normal, like the shadows were gathering strength. I kept seeing those figures, the ones that never looked right, lingering just at the edge of my vision. But this time, they were bolder. No more gliding silently or hiding behind shelves. They were watching me, waiting, like they knew this was my last night, and they weren't going to let me leave without a fight. The whispers got louder too. Not just background noise, but clear, sharp voices in my ear. They weren't words I recognized, but I swear I felt the meaning behind them, warnings, threats, promises. It was like the store itself was trying to tell me to stay, or else. At one point, the power cut out. Total blackout. The emergency lights kicked in, casting that eerie red glow that makes everything look like a horror movie set. I was alone, or so I thought, but the sound of footsteps echoed through the aisles, slow and deliberate, coming closer. I grabbed my flashlight and started moving toward the back, hoping to reach the exit. But the store twisted. Doors led to places I didn't recognize. Aisles stretched farther than they should. It was like the building had become a maze designed to trap me. Then I saw it, the biggest figure of them all, standing tall and still near the freezer section. Its eyes glowed faintly in the red light. It didn't move, but the air around it shimmered like heat. I felt a wave of cold wash over me, like freezing in the middle of summer. I wanted to run, but my feet were glued. The figure's gaze pinned me in place, like I was nothing more than a bug caught in a trap. For a moment, I thought this was how it ended. But then, a voice came over the intercom. Not the usual announcements. This was low, distorted, almost mechanical. It said, "You can leave, but you can't forget." The power snapped back on, and just like that, the store returned to normal. The shadows vanished. The whispers stopped. The figures were gone. I didn't hesitate. I clocked out and ran. But that night changed me forever. I left the night shift, yeah, but the store, those things had never left my mind. I'm still watching my back, still hearing those whispers when it's quiet. I learned that quitting isn't just about walking away. Sometimes the past follows you, and sometimes it waits in the dark. Alright, before we wrap this up, I got to lay it straight for anyone thinking about picking up a night shift, especially at places like that grocery store I worked at. It ain't just a quiet gig with empty aisles and late night snacks. There's something else lurking in the shadows, something that doesn't show up on any job description or training manual. If you're gonna do this, listen close, trust your gut. When things start feeling off, when the lights flicker too much, when the silence feels heavier than it should, that's not just tired brain playing tricks. It's a warning. Don't brush it off. And whatever you do, don't break the unspoken rules the night crew follows. Those rules aren't superstitions, they're survival guides. Keep your eyes open, but don't stare. Some things aren't meant to be seen directly, and if you start hearing whispers, footsteps, or catching shadows moving where nothing should be, don't chase them, walk away. Keep your distance. Remember, you're not just working a job, you're standing guard on the edge of something you don't fully understand. And one more thing, don't expect the people in charge to have your back. From what I saw, management often knows more than they let on, but chooses to keep quiet. Sometimes they're more invested in keeping the doors open than keeping you safe. Night shifts can be lonely, eerie, and downright terrifying. But the worst thing you can do is ignore the signs and pretend it's all normal. Because some nights, the shadows aren't just shadows, and some customers, they aren't human. If you hear nothing else from me, remember this: don't underestimate the night. Respect it. Stay alert. And if you ever feel like you're in over your head, get out while you still can. That's all I've got. Stay safe out there. And with that, we've come full circle. If you've stuck around this long, you know this story is not just about a grocery store or a night shift. It's about the thin line between our world and the unknown lurking just beyond. Thanks for listening.